Principal Expels little black girl without reason. Then her grandma's reaction changed everything. Enjoy the story. The hallway was silent, except for the soft sobs of a little girl clutching a worn-out backpack against her chest. Amara Johnson was only 11, small for her age, with deep brown eyes that now brimmed with confusion and shame. The cold voice of Principal Whitmore still echoed in her ears. "You're no longer welcome at this school, Amara. This place isn't for your kind." No explanation, no warning, just those cruel, final words. And then 2 security guards taking her by the arms and marching her out as students stared, some wide-eyed, others giggling behind cupped hands. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating every tear that rolled down her cheeks. Amara's shoes, hand-me-downs too big for her feet, dragged across the polished floors. Her braids had come undone during gym, and she hadn't had time to fix them. Her sweater was frayed at the sleeves. She looked like someone out of place in a world that was built to ignore girls like her. Outside the gates of Westlake Academy, she stood in the cold Chicago wind, alone, as the heavy school doors slammed behind her with finality. The sound reverberated through her small frame, and she clutched her backpack tighter, as if it might shield her from the world's cruelty. By the time she reached her grandmother's small apartment in the South Side, her tears had dried into salty trails on her cheeks. The apartment smelled of lavender oil and old books. Her grandmother, Lillian, was already waiting at the window, her back hunched with age but her eyes sharp as ever. When she saw Amara walking home mid-morning, she opened the door with trembling hands. "Why are you home, baby?" she asked, her voice a mixture of concern and knowing. Somehow Lillian had been expecting this day to come, though she had prayed it wouldn't. Amara's lips quivered. "They kicked me out, Grandma. The principal said I don't belong there. I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice broke on the last word, and the dam of emotions threatened to burst again. Lillian felt her knees weaken. Her mind spun with disbelief, then rage. She wrapped Amara in her arms and whispered, "You belong everywhere. Don't you let anyone tell you otherwise." She smelled the lingering scent of the cafeteria food in Amara's hair, felt the girl's heartbeat against her own chest, and made a silent vow. But Lillian didn't cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She prayed. That night, while Amara slept fitfully in the room they shared, Lillian didn't close her eyes. Instead, she pulled out a dusty old box from under her bed. Inside were letters, papers from another life, a life no one in this town remembered or wanted to. Her fingers, knotted with arthritis, traced over signatures and seals, names that still carried weight even after all these years. The next morning, as the sun struggled through the smog, Lillian dressed Amara in her best clothes. "We're going back," she said simply. Amara's eyes widened with fear, but there was something in her grandmother's posture that calmed her. Lillian stood taller today, her silver hair bound neatly at the nape of her neck, wearing a dress Amara had never seen before, crisp, elegant, with a subtle pin on the lapel. When they arrived at the school, the security guard moved to block their entry. "Ma'am, the girl has been expelled." "Yes, I'm aware." Lillian's voice cut through his with surprising authority. "And I'm here to speak with Principal Whitmore. He's in a meeting. Then he'll have to reschedule." Lillian walked past him, her hand firmly around Amara's. The guard, bewildered by her confidence, hesitated just long enough for them to slip through. The secretary outside Whitmore's office had the same reaction. "You can't go in there," she called, but Lillian had already opened the door. Inside, Principal Robert Whitmore sat with 2 board members discussing budgets. His face contorted with shock when he saw Lillian and Amara. "How did you get in here? This is a private meeting." Lillian remained standing, her dignity a palpable force in the room. "Yesterday you expelled my granddaughter without cause or explanation. I'd like to know why." Whitmore recovered his composure, leaning back with practiced authority. "Mrs. Johnson, your granddaughter doesn't meet the standards of this institution. We have certain expectations." "What expectations would those be, Robert? That children come from wealthy families, that they're a certain shade?" The board members shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. "Mrs. Johnson, perhaps we should discuss this another time." I marched with Dr. King, Lillian said quietly. The room fell silent. I've stood in rooms where laws were written. I've seen men like you before, hiding behind words like standards and expectations when what you really mean is different and unwanted. Whitmore's face flushed. That's quite enough. Security will escort you out. Lillian didn't move. Before they do, you should know that I've made some calls this morning to old friends. One in particular was very interested to hear about Amara's situation. As if on cue, the building began to vibrate. A distant roar grew louder, and through the window they watched as a jet-black helicopter descended over the schoolyard, its blades sending papers and ponytails flying in every direction. Students rushed out. Teachers scrambled to maintain order. Whitmore's face drained of color as he ran to the window. What in the world is going on? The door of the helicopter opened slowly, and out stepped a tall man in a charcoal suit, followed closely by two assistants. His silver hair caught the sunlight as cameras flashed around him. Gasps erupted as the insignia on the helicopter became clear. Hamilton Agriculture Corp., the nation's largest private landowner and food supplier, and the man commanding all the attention, Thomas Hamilton, a self-made millionaire, a man whose endorsement could change entire economies. Whitmore stumbled out of his office, plastering on a fake smile. Mr. Hamilton, this is certainly a surprise. Thomas nodded, unsmiling. I'm here because a girl named Amara Johnson was expelled without cause. Whitmore laughed nervously. Yes, well, there must have been a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can discuss this. I'd prefer to discuss it now in front of everyone, Hamilton said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, where students and teachers had gathered. Lillian, are you here? From the crowd, Lillian emerged, still holding Amara's hand. There were whispers among the teachers who had never seen this side of the quiet grandmother who sometimes dropped Amara off late because of her night shifts. Hamilton smiled warmly at Lillian, then turned serious as he addressed Whitmore. 50 years ago, Lillian Johnson worked in my father's law office as a secretary when no other firm would hire a black woman. When he died suddenly, leaving me, orphaned at 16, it was Lillian who made sure I didn't end up in foster care. She found distant relatives, arranged for my education, kept my father's practice running until I could take over. The crowd murmured. Whitmore's smile had frozen in place. Without her, there would be no Hamilton Agriculture, no scholarships, no grants. He paused, letting the implications sink in. And now I hear her granddaughter has been expelled for— What exactly? Whitmore stammered. Well, there were concerns about her academic fit. Amara scored in the top percentile of the state in mathematics, Hamilton interrupted. I reviewed her file myself. So try again, Principal Whitmore. A flock of birds passed overhead, momentarily casting shadows across the courtyard. In that brief darkness, something shifted in the atmosphere. Power was changing hands. Effective immediately, Hamilton continued, I'm establishing a $5 million grant to Westlake Academy for underprivileged students, on one condition. The crowd held its breath. You apologize publicly right now and you reinstate Amara Johnson. Whitmore looked around desperately, searching for support, but found none. The cameras were rolling, students recording on phones, teachers watching. He had no choice. He turned to Amara. Miss Johnson, I deeply regret the actions taken yesterday. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. But Amara didn't move. She stood beside her grandmother, their hands still joined. The apology wasn't real, but it didn't matter. She had won. What happened next would be talked about for years. Hamilton announced not just Amara's reinstatement, but a full scholarship for her future. Education. The board members who had sat silently during Lillian's earlier confrontation now scrambled to shake Hamilton's hand, to be associated with his generosity. As the crowd began to disperse, a young teacher approached Amara. I'm sorry I didn't speak up yesterday, she whispered. I was afraid of losing my job, but I won't be silent again. Amara nodded, understanding more about adult fear and courage than any 11-year-old should. That afternoon, when the helicopter lifted again, it wasn't just Amara and Lillian who were leaving. It was a girl who now knew her worth, and a grandmother who had fought battles long before this one, and won again. As they rose above the school, Amara looked down at the tiny faces below. She wasn't invisible anymore. She turned to her grandmother, noticing for the first time the quiet strength in her lined face, the history in her hands. "Grandma," she asked, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's roar, "how did you know Mr. Hamilton would come?" Lillian smiled, the years falling away from her face. "Baby, I've lived long enough to know that sometimes you have to remind the world who you are." She took out an old photograph from her purse, a much younger Lillian standing beside a young man at his law school graduation. Thomas never forgot who helped him, and now neither will that school forget you. As they flew over Chicago, the city spread out beneath them like a promise. Amara felt something new unfurling in her chest. Not just pride, but possibility. And somewhere in the wind she heard her grandmother whisper, "You are not small, you are mighty, and you belong." Have you ever witnessed or experienced someone standing up against injustice like Lillian did? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following week brought changes no one could have predicted. A state investigation into Westlake Academy's admission and disciplinary practices was announced. 3 other board members resigned. The young teacher who had apologized to Amara was appointed to lead a new diversity committee. And Amara? She walked into school with her head high, her uniform crisp, her homework always done. Some students avoided her, intimidated by her connection to Hamilton. Others sought her out, curious about the quiet girl who had caused such a storm. During a mathematics competition, when Amara solved a problem no one else could tackle, even the most reluctant teachers had to acknowledge her brilliance. Slowly the whispers changed from the girl who was expelled to the girl who's going places. Lillian noticed these changes with quiet satisfaction. Each night, when Amara showed her the day's schoolwork, she saw not just equations and essays, but a future unveiling itself. The frayed sweaters were replaced, the 2 big shoes donated, but Lillian made sure Amara never forgot. "Remember where we come from," she would say. "Remember who helped us along the way." And Amara did remember. When a new student arrived, mid-year, wearing hand-me-downs and carrying a battered backpack, it was Amara who sat with her at lunch, who shared her textbooks, who stood between her and the whispers. On a crisp autumn day, as gold and crimson leaves danced across the courtyard, Thomas Hamilton returned to Westlake Academy, this time not in a helicopter, but in a simple black car. He came to announce the opening of a new STEM wing named in honor of Lillian Johnson. At the ceremony, with cameras flashing and reporters crowding, Hamilton insisted that Lillian cut the ribbon. Her hands shook, not with age or nervousness, but with the weight of the moment. Standing beside her, Amara felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Later, as they walked through the gleaming new laboratories, Hamilton bent down to Amara's level. "Your grandmother taught me something important once," he said. "That true power isn't about making people fear you, it's about making them see you." Amara nodded, understanding now why her grandmother had never sought revenge against Whitmore, why she had insisted on change instead of punishment, why she had accepted the apology that wasn't real. Because sometimes winning isn't about defeating an enemy. It's about changing the rules of the game. As winter settled over Chicago, bringing with it hushed snowfalls and early darkness, Amara found herself thriving. Her mathematics teacher had entered her in a national competition. The library had ordered books she'd requested. Even Principal Whitmore, still in his position but fundamentally altered by the experience, nodded respectfully when she passed. On the last day before winter break, Amara found a small package in her locker. Inside was a pin identical to the one Lillian wore on that life-changing day. A note accompanied it. "For the future leader, from one who believes in you." It wasn't signed, but Amara knew, just as she knew that the path ahead, while not easy, was hers to walk. That evening, as snow fell gently outside their apartment, window Amara and Lillian sat together, drinking hot chocolate and planning for the holidays. The room was warm with love and possibility. "Grandma," Amara said suddenly, "thank you for fighting for me." Lillian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Child." There are battles in this world worth fighting, and you are the most important one of all. We all face moments when the world tries to tell us we don't belong, but remember, your worth is not determined by those who try to diminish you, but by those who recognize your light. You are amazing. If you genuinely enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe. It's a great feedback for me. If it made you feel seen, heard, or simply reminded you that change is still possible, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. See you.